been 2 years since the last colored pencil guitar, so I figured it was about time to revisit the idea and try doing something new with it. You'll notice that the mold for this one is shaped kind of funny, and that's because I've included the neck in the mold. So the body and neck will all be one continuous piece, otherwise known as a neck-through guitar. The template I made is based off of a PRS body shape, but whereas a PRS has a carved top, this is going to have a flat top. I decided to use a piece of bird's eye maple for the fretboard instead of using colored pencils because I thought that might look a bit too busy. The maple kind of adds a nice contrast to the design and will also provide some strength to the colored pencil neck. The piece of maple I used for the fretboard is pretty thick. It's about a ½ inch. A typical fretboard is about a ¼ inch at its thickest point. I did this because I'm going to add a flood coat of epoxy on top of the entire face of the body, and once I get that flood coat on, the fretboard will be the correct height above the body. Once I had the truss rod and fretboard installed, I did a bit of scraping and sealing, then got to the flood coat on the body. For the fret dot markers, I used colored pencils, as I've done in the past, but this time I inlaid them roughly a 1/16 of an inch below the surface of the fretboard, and then I sealed them with some super glue and filled in the rest of the hole with epoxy. And I did this so that the colored leads of the pencils aren't exposed on the top of the fretboard. If they were, I would get streaks of colors on the fretboard while sanding the radius. Also, you might get that colored lead on your fingers while playing. Doing them this way completely seals them up. Here's a little trick that I've found while building these colored pencil guitars. When sanding this material, you'll smear the colors all over the place, and the wood in the colored pencils will turn brown or gray, especially with a palm sander. So the wood's all smeared at this point, but if I go in with a razor blade and lightly scrape the surface, I can get that original color back and clean it up a bit. After I got the headstock all cleaned up, I poured a flood coat of epoxy on it to seal it up. For this guitar, I decided to go with single coil pickups, same setup as the Strat, so there's 3 of them to route. In a lot of my builds, I've used humbuckers, mainly because I think they look better in general, but with the type of music I play, I actually prefer the sound of single coil pickups. The pickups I'm using in this are Fender Vintage 5762 single coils. Cutting out the tuner holes, and then it's just a bunch of carving, which really brings the guitar into shape. One thing you'll probably notice is that I didn't plane down the backside of the guitar to the leads. The reason I did this is so that the neck joint and belly carve really stand out on the backside, as they're the only areas with the colored lead exposed. Once I was happy with the shape of the guitar, I went through the sanding and razor scraping process on everything, and then I started applying a few coats of epoxy. This helps seal the wood before the clear coat, as well as allows me to fill any holes or gaps in the material with epoxy. Alright, so now we've got the entire thing clear coated and it's looking nice and shiny. I did not clear coat the top face of the guitar because it's all epoxy, so I can wet sand and buff it to get a nice shiny finish. The top of the fretboard I did clear coat, and you can see it's got some orange peel on it, so I've got to wet sand and buff it out as well before applying the frets. These guitars often take weeks to months for me to build, and because of that, there's a lot of time between posting videos here on YouTube. So I started a Patreon so that those interested in seeing more of my build process can follow along on a more regular basis on the current projects going on in my shop. I'll also have some extra guitar demos along with other content relating to my guitars on there. If you're interested in learning more, you can click on the link in the description to check out what my Patreon offers. After pressing the frets, I'll file and bevel them. This will also end up sanding off the clear coat on the edge of the neck, so I have to go back and spray a few more coats of clear on the edge of the neck as well as over the headstock decal to bury it. I find this to be the fastest method for me in terms of fretting and finishing the neck. Finally, it's just some wet sanding and buffing along with some final fretwork and installation of the hardware and electronics.